will commence with Vedic chanting.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Yaschandasam Vishwarupaha Chandobhyadhyamritaat Sambabhuva Samendro Medhaya Asprinotu Amritasya Devadharano Bhuyasam Shariram me vicharshanam Jivha me madhumattama Karnabhyam bhuri vishrubam Brahmana koshosi medhaya pihitah Shrutam me gopaya Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Medha Devi Jushamana Naagad Vishwachi Bhadra Sumanasya Mana Tvaya Jushtanudamana Duruktaan Brihad Badema Bidathe Subiraha Tvaya Jushta Rishir Bhavati Devi Tvaya Brahma Gata Shri Rutatvaya Tvaya Jushtaschitram Bindate Vasusano Jushasvadrabino Namedhe Medham Indro Dadatu Medhan Devi Saraswati Medham me Ashvina Bhubhava Dhattang Pushkarasraja Apsara Suchaya Medha Gandharveshu Chayan Manaha Daivi Medha Saraswati Samam Medha Surabhir Jushatag Swaha Amam Medha Surabhir Vishwarupa Hiranyavarna Jagati Jagamya Urjasvati Payasa Pinvamana Samam Medha Supratika Jushantam Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
The Vedic chanting was led by Swami Prananathananji Maharaj. I now request revered Swami Supernanji Maharaj, the Secretary of the Institute, to felicitate the distinguished speakers on the dais and later deliver his welcome speech.
Om Jananing Charadang Deving Ramakrishnang Jagat Gurum Padapadamitayo Sritva Pranamami Muhurmu. We usually hold 1 or 2 seminars in a financial year. This is our tradition, but this year we have to hold many more because of several reasons that I am not going to expound, especially Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. This is the India government scheme, and we have to hold one seminar, and we have decided that this seminar be included as one of the ones under Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, launched by Government of India. Now the topic of this seminar is Morals Matter, Ethics and Human Behavior. This is the most important topic for all of us, not only for the sannyasins, but we sannyasins take special interest in that, because without having a moral and ethical base, spirituality cannot be developed. Spiritual life is impossible without this. So I congratulate Swami Tadbhratanandaji, the monk in charge of CISR Institute, Special Department for Research, for selecting this particular topic. And we are fortunate and privileged in a way that we have Srimat Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj to have in our midst to speak, to address the keynote speech. It is really something which we have been looking for. We always remembered him and him only for the keynote addresses on such seminars, and it is our privilege that he always agreed in the past, and he this time also agrees in spite of his failing health. I welcome him in our midst, and I offer my Sastanga pranams to his lotus feet. He is one of the vice presidents of the Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission. We have in our midst Dr. Nirmal Narayan Chakraborty, the Professor, Department of Philosophy, Rabindra Bharati University. Nirmal Narayan Chakraborty. And also we welcome in our midst Professor Mrinal Miri. He is a person who received Padma Bhushan for being an educationist. So generally we have not seen the government to come forward to pay their respect to such department and education. I don't think that previously any educational, any figure, however great that figure might be, received such an award, only for the cause of education. He is philosopher educationist, former chairman, Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi. We have another 23 or 24 speakers for the next 2 days also. Prafulla Kumar Mahapatto, Rakesh Chandra, Radharaman Chakraborty, Professor James Starwa, Professor Chandra Chakraborty, Dr. Bhaskarjit Niyog, Professor Indrani Sanyal, Professor Amlan Dasgupta, Professor Putit Pabon Das, Dr. Manoj Panda, Professor Ayan Narvesan, Professor Aditya Mohanty, Professor R.P. Goldman, Professor Amita Chatterjee, Professor Sobuj Koli Sen, Professor Amitabh Dasgupta, Professor Otosri Chatterjee, Dr. Anita Santaram, Professor Chirantan Chatterjee, Dr. Manoj Panda, and Srimat Swami Atmapriyanandaji, formerly Vice Chancellor of Vivekananda University, Belur Math. So, I was speaking about the importance of this subject, morality, ethics, human behavior. And the person who is going to expound this subject is no other than Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj. We look forward to him always for some such erudite speeches. So I want to speak a very little on the subject based on some of his ideas he gave away long ago, some 30 years ago or so, as these are spread over in the pages of the Prabuddha Bharata. The beautiful editorials he used to write. And we have all been waiting for those editorials every month. So we are moral and ethical in our behavior, not for police or public ridicule. We seek morally strong life because we feel it is good to be moral. We feel we should imbibe good qualities like non-violence, truthfulness, purity, both physical and mental levels, love, kindness, sacrifice, service, and of course abstain from dirty evils. In order to know more about morality, we have to study ethics, which deals with moral philosophy, which is also a branch of human knowledge. So morality is an important subject under ethics. So in ethics, morality is included in a way. Ethics is the study of moral science. Ethics is a normative science since it deals with value judgment as against positive science or statement which deals with observed facts. We can cite an example. Positive statements could be tested by referring to the facts. If someone questions about their validity. As an example, we say during the last year, the growth rate of India's economy was 5% only. This is a positive statement. Because if someone wants to refute it, then we can disprove that by referring to the facts. But the normative statements deal with value judgment pertaining to the subject. There is no object here. Objectivity is almost nil or almost nil. It is always associated with should or ought. For example, our government, India's government, when we say India's government ought to give more importance to the problem of unemployment than that of inflation. So we are suffering from both the problems, but which one is to be given top priority? Should be. It is a matter of value judgment. So morality, whether it is internal or external to man, is a law imposed by God. The Christian idea is that it is external, but Immanuel Kant puts it the way that moral law is absolutely internal. Man has an inner urge to follow a good life. This is his famous concept of categorical imperative. Ethical life emphasizes happiness as the goal of life. It also emphasizes the other view, the concept of duty and right. coming from the law of ethical standard. Vedanta says it is perfection which includes both right and happiness. But the Indian thought has gone far beyond this. It recognizes rhythm, which is the universal law governing both physical and psychological and moral standards. We have fallen from rhythm, artistic purity, and we have to realize it. That is our only lasting goal. We must sacrifice for others and cease to be selfish. We learned it from nature. Not a single entity of nature lives for itself. Everyone in nature lives for others. But man with selfish motive tries to grab everything and ultimately suffer. To gain happiness and right, we have to sacrifice. This is the basis of morality. We have to make our life a perfect yajna. The Gita exhorts this idea in the sloka, 9th sloka of chapter 3. What done not as sacrifice binds us. Swamiji stresses this yajna over all other ideas. His philosophy of service or seva yoga springs from the integral view of life, both in man and in nature. We all know Swamiji's exhortation. Those who live for themselves are more dead than alive, and those who live for others are alive. They live alone. And this law of sacrifice that we see in nature as rhythm, when followed by us, with all seriousness, the vision of truth is attained. There follows a gradual transformation of consciousness from Muladhara, the lower level at the base of our spine, to Sahasrara, the highest level at the head. This is called the awakening of Kundalini. Every moment, nature is sending out the message to us for coming out of slavery and be free. At every step, we are knocked down and shown we are all bound, and yet simultaneously the feeling comes up that we are free. An inner voice, as if constantly whispers to our ears, you are free, you are free. You be a yogi, tasmat yogi bhavarjuno. If this urge to be pure is not there in us, we would not have run after ethics and morality and even spirituality. When we want to be men of true eminence, we have to strive hard to be moral and ethical. Without morality and ethics, none can hope to be free. And unless one becomes free, one becomes pure, one cannot become free. So it has to be specially noted that we do not appreciate morality or ethics for their own sake. We need to be moral, ethical, because we need to be pure, to be divine, and to be spiritual. Swamiji says the whole universe is nothing but the result of the struggle to recover our lost freedom and purity. In fact, we have to perfectly understand why there is immorality, unethics, competition, and cruelty. A moral man goes straight towards purity. The wicked one is also going towards that purity, but in a roundabout way, oftentimes stumbling. The lesson is clear and simple. Be moral and ethical and build up your good and strong character based on good deeds. Otherwise, be ready to be tossed against the whirlpools of the surging sea of life. Therefore, it is moral values that count most in shaping our life. We see people in large number reach the life of eminence, but as Einstein puts it, they cannot hope to stay there for long. It is only morality and ethics that can give beauty and dignity to life. So with this very brief observation of my own, I once again welcome you all, today's speakers, Maharajji, and the next two speakers present here, and all the listeners. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Reverend Maharaj. Swami Vivekananda, in his letter to Govinda Sahai in the year 1891, had famously written, "The secret of religion lies not in theories but in practice. To be good and to do good, that is the whole of religion." This seminar attempts to explore at least the tip of the iceberg of that significant statement. Professor Nirmalya Narayan Chakrabarti, a professor of philosophy, Rabindra Bharati University, who is chiefly instrumental in shaping and structuring the seminar, will now introduce to us its theme, Morals Matter, Ethics and Human Behavior. His areas of specialization include analytic philosophy of language, Indian philosophy of language, epistemology, and environmental ethics. Dr. Chakrabarti was a Commonwealth Fellow at the University of Glasgow, Scotland, and has been a visiting professor at University of Naples, L'Orientale, Italy. I now request the professor to take the podium.
स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Revered Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj, respected Swami Suparnanandaji, distinguished philosopher Professor Mrinal Miri, eminent philosophers gathered here, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a privilege for me to have the opportunity to introduce the theme of the International Seminar on Morals Matter, Ethics and Human Behavior, organized by Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture and financially sponsored by Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Ethics deals with values, with good and bad, with right and wrong. We cannot escape from getting involved in ethics. It is always possible to ethically evaluate what we do or what we do not do. Thinking what we should do or what we should not do takes us into the realm of ethics. Ethics in this sense comes close to human existence, not only to be studied by professional scholars confined to universities. Answers to the issue concerning the origin of ethics are varied and challenging. Many of the ancient myths offer different conjectures regarding the origin of human life and also point at how human life is so confusing and conflict-ridden. And this discord arises due to the observance of rules that thwarts one's immediate desires. The ancient legends are full of parables displaying how duties clash, and then attempts are made to diffuse this tension by alluding to more general principles. And this search goes on till a final arbitrator is found, projecting on the very idea of morality as a whole. The young shepherds in Plato's Dialogue Republic, poignant statement that justice is only for the weak, and Yudhishthira's distressing query to Bhishma with regard to the nature and the very plausibility of a universal principle of dharma are precursors to the moral query concerning the justification of ethics. Answers to this ancient question range from treating ethics as a mechanism of egoistic prudence, primarily derived from the Greeks and then Hobbes, to regarding ethics as an attempt to harmonize man's imperfect nature with the divine cosmic arrangement, echoing the Rigvedic idea of Rita. Humans, as moral agents, are also moved by different motives that arise on various occasions, like friendship, compassion, gratitude, sympathy, family affection, etc. Irrespective of whether these are human frailties or humane virtues, this is the human providence. Once we start probing deep into these questions, by excavating the underlying values, we will be traveling the roads that have the footprints of many thinkers across the cultures. The present seminar shall try to trace these footprints, discover the major works where thinkers have taken alternative turns. And all of these, it is hoped, will stimulate our thoughts that will show us the path ahead. Some of the questions that this seminar would deliberate on are: why be moral? What is the justification of being moral? When we talk about moral values, are these values anchored in the world? When, for example, we judge killing is morally wrong, apparently this statement does not describe any fact in the world. If it is not descriptive in nature, what it is that we communicate by uttering this sentence? Often we falter in performing an action following a moral principle. Even though we know what is right, we fail to follow the right path. Why is there such a divorce between head and heart? Also, experience of a moral dilemma puts us in difficult situation. How could one address moral dilemma? We shall also explore the seminal contributions of some key contemporary Indian thinkers in the field of ethics. If ethics is supposed to guide us in our behavior, then discourse on these and many other related issues would steer us through the moral trepidation. We are looking forward to the stimulating talks and thought-provoking deliberations for the coming 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for describing the structure of the seminar. It is a matter of great joy and blessing to have with us Srimat Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj, the Vice President of the Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission. Revered Maharaj had penned many insightful articles when he was editor of the Prabuddha Bharata, the journal started by Swami Vivekananda, and has contributed innumerable write-ups in various circles. He even now teaches and trains monastic novices of the order and has always been a source of inspiration and guiding light for spiritual aspirants. When we approached the revered Maharaj to request him to deliver a talk, he let in a secret. He told us that the subject of ethics is quite close to his heart and has spent over 3 decades researching on the topic. So let us seize this blessed opportunity and listen to revered Maharaj with an awakened mind. I now humbly call upon revered Maharaj to deliver the keynote address on the subject, Contribution of Swami Vivekananda to the Field of Ethics.
જોયેલા છે, અમારે જોયેલા છે. દરકાર হবে না জননীম শারদাম দেবীম রামকৃষ্ণম জগদ্গুরুম পাদপদ্মে তয়ো শ্রুত্বা প্রণমামি মুহুর্মুহুর. নমঃ শ্রীয়তিরাজায় বিবেকানন্দ সূরে সচ্চিৎ সুখ স্বরূপায় स्वामिने तापहारिणे. श्रद्धेय सुपर्णानंद जी महाराज, श्रद्धेय आत्मप्रियानंद जी महाराज, श्रद्धेय धर्माल्य नारायण चक्रवर्ती, डॉक्टर धर्माल्य नारायण चक्रवर्ती, श्रद्धेय प्रोफेसर Mrinal, Miri, and all the distinguished members of this audience. My Sasradha Namaskar to all of you, all of you. The main thrust of this keynote address is to highlight the contributions that Swami Vivekananda has made to ethics and morality. Swamiji's name is generally associated with certain exhortations such as be fearless, have faith in yourself, you can do anything and everything, you are omnipotent, and this like this. Most of the people know only these exhortations only as Swami Vivekananda's contributions, that Swamiji has made important contributions in the field of ethics, pioneering, ground-breaking contributions in the field of ethics is known to very, very few people. One of the main reasons for this neglect of ethics, this ignorance about Swamiji's contribution to ethics is the neglect of ethical studies in India. Ethics is very much neglected in India. Our universities in the West, most of the universities had a department of moral science. Oxford, Cambridge, Sorbonne, even Harvard, everywhere you will find there is a department of moral science, and hundreds of books have been written on ethics. Whereas in India, very hardly any university has got a department of moral science. One of the main reasons for this neglect of ethics in India is our philosophical approach also. Our Indian philosophy, Indian philosophical mind of Indians is dominated by Advaita Vedanta. And Advaita Vedanta, especially Shankara's commentary on Brahma Sutras, and other scriptures. The Brahma Sutra, the first sutra of Brahma Sutra, Adhato Brahma Jijnasa. So there Shankara says, there Atha and Ataha. Ataha means after, generally. So generally Ramanuja and others, according to them, after means after Dharma Jijnasa. After Dharma Jijnasa, you should begin Brahma Jijnasa. Whereas Shankara outright says, no need. There is no need for Brahma Jijnasa. He is very for various reasons. He is very sensitive regarding the Mimamsakas. So the Dharma Jijnasa, according to Shankara, is not necessary. If a person is endowed with sadhana chatushtaya, that is enough. He can take up Brahma Jijnasa. There, on the Anandagiri's Tika, he says that in those people who have got sadhana, those who are sadhana chatushtaya sampannas, they might have or must have finished the Dharma Jijnasa in the previous birth. That is how he explains. Anyway, the Dharma Jijnasa has been relegated to the realm of the Mimamsakas and also to some extent our Naiyayikas. They slugged it out down the centuries. These Mimamsakas and Naiyayikas, they have been fighting over these problems of ethics. Whereas Advaita Vedanta is beyond ethics. In this connection, to avoid misunderstanding, certain principles, I would like to offer simple clarifications. There are three words. One is ethic. Ethic is a singular, ethic, and its plural is ethics. That is a plural, different. The singular is ethic. So that is one word. Another is ethos. Ethos. Third one is ethics. These three words need to be clarified. First of all, ethic. Ethics, the Oxford Dictionary defines ethic as a system of moral principles, rules of conduct. In other words, ethic stands for a code of conduct. It is in this sense we use the word environmental ethics, medical ethics. I believe it should have been, instead of ethics, it should have been environmental ethic, to avoid confusion with actual ethics. It should have been environmental ethic and environmental and medical ethic. These are that should have avoided the unnecessary confusion with ethics. Ethics is a universal philosophy where there is no question of medical and environmental. All these distinctions do not apply in that field. And then ethics. A universal ethic, as we saw, ethics is a code of conduct. A universal code of conduct becomes acceptable to the common people only when it grows out of the ethos of the people. The word ethos is defined as the characteristic spirit, the moral values and basic attitudes of society or culture. It is the collective attitude of a group. It is the way people as a whole see, judge and react to everything around them. This is the definition of ethos. The concept of ethos, as many of you know, was first propounded by the 19th century German philosopher Hegel. He said, every child every child in the formation of his character is suckled at the breast of the universal ethos. Is a very oft quoted statement of Hegel. This concept of ethos was later on popularized by the British philosopher F.H. Broadley. These two concepts of ethic and ethos deal with practical life, whereas we come to the third word, and that is ethics. Ethics deals with the theoretical basis of moral behavior. Two problems of this theoretical basis. One is to distinguish the right from the wrong. That is, how to distinguish right action, right from the wrong, or from the good from the bad. Such a distinction can be made only on the basis of a certain moral standard. But that is where a need for standard comes. How can we judge a moral situation such as the one Arjuna found himself in at the beginning of the Kurukshetra war, Mahabharata war? Was he wrong in trying to avoid that? And was Sri Krishna right in exhorting Arjuna, Yudhyasa, bar bolte? You will find most of the Western scholars, they never could accept this. Why Sri Krishna did this constant exhortation, Yudhyasa, and this war, you will find at the end of this war, only some 3 or 4 people were alive. The Pandavas, Ashwatthama and 1 or 2 people were there. All the thousands of people perished. Nothing was there left. So, and still Krishna asked Arjuna to fight. So this kinds of situation in our lives also, we come across various situations in which we are called upon to take moral decisions. How to take moral decisions. In that case, such cases, we need a definite moral standard. Those who have got a clear idea of the moral standard, they can take correct decisions. In fact, the symptoms, the signs of a mature person is he has got a time-tested through his own experience, certain moral standards, and he will never give up those moral standards. So ethics is generally regarded as the study of moral standards. That is where ethics differs from ethic and ethos and morality. So in the main thrust of this what is it? This introductory, what is that? This keynote is, keynote address. Main interest, the thrust is to expound Swami Vivekananda's important contributions to the field of ethics. Certain important things are to be told. Apart from that, there are 3 other issues also I would like to offer clarifications. And that is, regarding this, there is a lot of ambiguity, if not confusion, in the minds of many people. One is the confusion or the conflict between, the lack of clarity between morality and ethics. This is a very important subject, morality and ethics. Many years ago, once I tried to introduce the subject of ethics in the curriculum for our novices in Belur, but we have got a training college where all the novices of the Ramakrishna order, they have to undergo study various different types of studies for 2 years. So once, many years ago, I tried to introduce the subject of ethics in the curriculum. Then the senior monks told me, why do you insist on this ethics as a separate subject? Let the brahmacharyans, let them read the lives of Thakur, Swamiji, that is enough. What more they need to know about ethics? I understood that this statement was based on the confusion between ethics and morality. The common as an adjective, moral and ethical, they are synonymous. But as in the noun, we use the noun, morality and ethics are basically different. Morality is a way of life, is a conduct. It is a type of way of our conduct and attitude, whereas ethics deals with this particular, it is standard, it is universal, meant for all people. So the morality, that and ethics, that is one area where ambiguity persists. The second is morality and spirituality. There is a lot of confusion about spiritual and moral. Many people take, especially in the West, the morality and spirituality are taken to be more or less same. And third one is the question, why we should be moral. There is a paper on this question by Professor P.M. Mahapatra. I find from the abstract, his approach is different. I will present a different approach. So these are the 3 areas I would like to offer some clarifications. So now we come to that normative ethics. Ethics we saw as normative. The endeavor to find a universal moral standard or criterion has developed along 2 lines. One line stressing action, conduct, and the other stressing character, values, etc. these two types of moral standards gave rise to two different types of judgment. Accordingly, we have two different approaches to normative ethics, known as the ethics of conduct and the ethics of virtue, or the ethics of doing and the ethics of being. That is, how to judge a person's morality, whether a person is moral or immoral. How will you know? One group says we have to see his actions. He may think that he is immoral, but the actions speak louder than words. So his actions decide, that reveal the real moral character of the person. So that is one group of people who say that action should be the standard, that is the way to judge a person's morality. Another group says, no, not the actions. A person may, at the spur of moment, he may do moral actions. A murderer, a criminal, he may help a blind man and take him across the road and show him the path. During the Chambal Valley dacoits, some years ago, somebody told me, one student himself told me, the dacoits, they would rob rich people and give the money to the poor. They, especially students. This Robin Hood in England, Robin Hood, he used to do that. That is to rob Peter to pay Paul, they say, as the saying goes. So that's why actions, you can't judge a person's morality by his actions. His character should be studied. So that is known as the virtue ethics. And the ethics of being, what a person is, that is more important. The other one is ethics of doing, ethics of action, doing and being, ethics of action and virtue. Now, we have to study first the ethics of action, that is, doing ethics. Professor C.D. Broad, he was a great scholar in the earlier years. Nowadays, nobody knows anything about him. But when we were students at that time, Professor C.D. Broad was a great figure, a prominent philosopher and thinker in those days. He has divided the various theories regarding action ethics into two broad categories. The teleological theories and deontological theories. Teleological theories and deontological theories both pertain to action ethics. That is, action, you have to judge a person's morality by his actions. But this regarding action, there are problems to judge, how to judge a person's actions. So there are two main theories. One is the teleological theories and the other one, deontological theories. Teleological theories hold that the rightness or wrongness of an action depends upon its consequences or results. Teleology always means, tele means future or the distance, something that happens at the end or towards the end. So the consequences or results of the people engage themselves in various activities with some end in view. In Mimamsaka there is a famous statement, Prayojanam anuddishya na mando api pravartate. Prayojanam anuddishya, kono prayojan bina keu kono kaj shuru kore na. Prayojana bina anuddishya na mando api pravartate. Anyway, so what is the end of actions? That is how we have to judge the actions. This view that generally they found that the end for which all people strive for is happiness. Everyone tries to attain happiness. This idea of happiness in philosophical and in ethical field, it is known as hedonism. Hedonism. That view that happiness is the end or goal which everyone seeks is known as hedonism. In ancient Greece, Democritus was one of the earliest philosophers to hold this view. In subsequent centuries, it was held by the Cyrenaics, Epicureans, and after a long gap in the 19th century, this view was revived by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Bentham is most well known for this idea of this hedonistic view, that is, the maximum happiness for the largest number of people. Swami Vivekananda has criticized this view. We need not go into those details. According to Bentham, we ought to aim at the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. Now we come to the deontological theories. The deontological theories hold that rightness or wrongness of an action depends upon the action itself, not on its consequences. The teleological view says the consequences are the results of the action, whereas deontological says not the consequences. We should do any duty, work, something because it is the duty, or we are convinced that it is the right thing to do. This discussion on this deontological and teleological their views, this was, though it may be surprising, but it was done in the presence of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna himself. In Sri Ramakrishna, when he was admitted to Shyampukur Bhati, there for his treatment, on Dr. Mahendralal Sarkar, who is the founder of the Society for the Cultivation of Science in Calcutta, where Dr. C.V. Raman did his research. Originally, he did his research there. This Mahendralal Sarkar, he used to raise various topics, and in front of Sri Ramakrishna, there was a big discussion on this deontological. The words were not used, but deontological and the teleological theories and all that. For instance, suppose a child has fallen into a canal or in the river. Those bystanders, those who are standing on the shore, without thinking, they immediately jump. This always happens. They jump into the river and try to save the child. Now, why do the people do that? Is it out of a sense of duty or out of teleological happiness? According to the teleological view, that there also it is happiness. If you didn't do it, you would have felt unhappy. When a child has fallen into the river, and if you didn't jump and try to save it, you would have felt unhappy. So to overcome that sorrow, he jumped, just did it. So there, it would be difficult to decide whether it is deontological or teleological view. And continuing, this deontology comes from the nothing to do with ontology. It is deontos. Deontos is one word. It is a one word, and it means obligation or duty. From that only this deontology comes. In India, in Hindu philosophy, this deontological view was held by the Mimamsakas, especially by Prabhakara Mimamsakas. Mimamsakas are of two letter Mimamsakas divided into two groups, the Bhattas and the Prabhakara Mimamsakas. The Prabhakara Mimamsakas, they introduced this idea of duty for duty's sake. That this Kant also, in the Western philosophy, it was Kant, Immanuel Kant, who propounded that view. He regarded moral law as an inherent property of the soul of man. That is to say, in everyone there is an inherent urge to act morally, which Kant called the categorical imperative. I think most of you, the scholars here, they know this word, categorical imperative. Something similar to that was propounded in India by Prabhakara, the Prabhakara school of Mimamsakas. It was they who introduced the idea of Nishkama karma. According to them, na abhuktam shiyate karma. Once a karma is done, it will produce a shakti or effect. Karma has got karma phal or karma phal. We always talk about karma phal. There are three kinds of karma phal. One is external karma phal. That is what we get from the external work. If you work in the garden, bagane kaj korle, you will produce these vegetables or flowers. Or randan, that if you do cooking, then you will produce food. That food, these are the result, the external result. It is this external result that Krishna says, you have to na karmanyeva adhikaraste na phaleshu kadachana. It is this external karma phal that we have to surrender to God. Why? Because God is the Malik. The whole earth belongs to God. We are only here for temporarily. We should remain here. We have to give up everything and go away. So, everything belongs to God. That is the first type of karma phal. The second type of karma phal is the samskaras. Whatever, if you do any work, it will produce a samskara in us. These two karma phal we've seen. You can see, you can know. The external karma phala, of course, we all know. And samskaras also, if you introspect, you can see how this work has changed our life. But apart from these two, there is a third type of karma phala, a cosmic result. That is what is known as adrishta or apurva, and in the popular language we say kapal, shiro likhita, our kapale nei, we say like that. That kapal is the unseen effect the karma produces. So that, according to the Mimamsakas, that nothing can be, it cannot be removed through jnana or bhakti. According to the jnanas, Advaita view is all karma, everything is product of ajnana. So when ajnana is destroyed through Brahma jnana, so then along with that karma phal sab chale jave, nothing will be left. Bhaktas, the Bhaktas view is God can kartum, akartum, anyatha var kartum shakyate. God can do, or He can stop, or He can modify as He pleases. So karma phala, even the cosmic effect, adrishta or apurva, sanchita karma, what we call in Vedanta, that God can change or He can completely stop it. Prarabdha, even prarabdha can be stopped by divine grace. So that is the nowadays I don't have enough strength to sustain this kind of talk. Swami Vivekananda's comment, then we were talking about two approaches. One is the action approach, action theories, and the other one is the life, the character, the virtue ethics. Virtue ethics, in recent years, there is a revival of interest in virtue ethics. In India, virtue ethics was followed mainly by the Sankhya philosophers and Vedantins. We follow the virtue ethics. So Swami Vivekananda, being a Vedantin, he also spoke about this virtue. So what is virtue? There are in each different religions have different codes of the moral codes. Every religion has got. In Buddhism, there are the Panchashila are there. In Judeo-Christian, they have got the 10 commandments. Surprisingly, out of the 10 commandments, the second half, the first 5 are the real cause of all conflicts. But the last 5 commandments, if you study, you will find they are almost same as the Buddhist Panchashila. It is more or less same. Anyway, the Greek ethics, their virtue, Plato and Aristotle, they were followers of the virtue ethics, not the action ethics. Plato and Aristotle. So there you will find there the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, courage, the justice, justice, and temperance, moderation. These are the 4 so-called cardinal virtues. In Christianity, Jesus Christ, though they have got what are called theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. Charity means love. So, but Jesus gave great importance to love of man. He was one of perhaps the only great world teacher to show the connection between love, human love for man and love for God. We must give credit to him. He had the boldness. Most of the religions you will find love for man is considered to be a bondage, an obstacle to love for God. But Jesus boldly said, love thy neighbor as thyself. And that is he took it as a test and criterion for love of God. How do you know that we love God? Everyone can say, I love God. Bhakti. What is a test of a bhakti? So, Jesus' answer is, if a person has love for human beings, that is the only test. This idea of many years, 2000 years later, Swami Vivekananda propounded this idea again, but in a different way and based on a different philosophy. Shivajnana Jiva Seva, that idea he got from Sri Ramakrishna. So there, that love of man depends upon not the external parameters, but upon the inherent divinity of the soul. In this connection, I would like to refer to this question of why should we be moral. I told you there are 3 points which will also need clarification. Why should we be moral? This P.K. Mahapatra, Professor Mahapatra has given, there is a paper. I think tomorrow the first session will be the discussion on this. His approach is different. I will give a different approach. This question of why we should be moral had never been asked. If you study ethics, there are so many books, hundreds of books are there, and there are so many theories about ethics, especially in the Western theories. All these theories are mostly, they deal with what is ethics. But why we should be moral? This question was raised for the first time by a Confucian philosopher, Chinese philosopher, in the 3rd century BCE. In the BC, before the Common Era, BCE, this Confucian philosopher by name, his anglicized name is Mencius, but the Chinese name is supposed to be Menju. Menju or Mencius. He propounded the view. He asked this question, why should we be moral? 2000 years later, Swami Vivekananda raised this question. Nobody had raised this question before that, at least as far as my understanding goes. So then, what was generally, if you are asked why you should be moral, what is the answer you will give? Christian and Muslim and Jews, they will say, according to these 3 religions, it is God who establishes moral order. Morality is based on a universal moral order. And this moral order, according to these religions, is established by God. So, you have to follow, to be moral means you have to follow this moral code of conduct. This moral theories have been a codes of conduct established by God. So, that's why if you go against this, transgress these moral codes, it will be a sin. That's a sin. I was surprised long ago when Swamiji always used to condemn this idea of sin. If you read Oxford Dictionary I saw, sin is defined as disobedience to God. So that some years ago, one Catholic priest asked me, why did Swami Vivekananda deny sin? Sin is everyone commits sin, and that is an important factor in moral life. I told him, Swamiji condemned only the Christian idea of sin, which means disobedience. We have got our Hindu idea of papa, pap and punya we have got. But that is not because in case of disobedience. That is moral order in according to Hindu view and the ancient Greek view also. It is a natural order. In the Greeks they called it logos. The logos. In Hinduism we call it Ritam. Ritam, our Nirmala Chandra Narayan Chakravarti professor, he also mentioned, I believe, about this Ritam. The Ritam was till later on gave way to Dharma. Dharma is a replace of Dharma or Ritam, Logos. These are all natural moral order. Automatically, so the reward for good actions will accrue automatically. In the same way, the result, the bad results of papa karma, that will also come. Anyway, that is, but so that means morality is a matter of compulsion, and we do out of fear. We have to be moral because of fear of God or fear of law of karma. So fear is the basis of morality. In ordinary life, you will find moral life is mostly fear of the police. Some years ago, when I was somewhere in the Himalayas, there in Mexican city, the police struck work. There was a police strike. Then the news spread. Within few minutes, people started looting shops. Decent citizens, they would simply go take the truck or the pickup van. They go and take refrigerators, washing machines, and things like that. They take from the shops, put into the pickup van and go take home. There was utter chaos. So it is the fear of the police that is the moral basis of moral behavior. Everywhere you can see that. So now, that was the popular belief, whereas Mencius or Menju took a different view. He said, we should be moral because morality, purity is our real nature. Immorality is fall from that. When we do something wrong, we fall from our real, original, pure nature. And that was the view expressed by what is his name? Mencius or Menju. He was opposed, but finally I believe he triumphed over his opponents. Anyway, that theory gradually people forgot and nobody raised that question again. But one thing, Menju did not know what is that pure real nature. Our original nature is pure. But what is our original nature, Mencius could not say. He did not know. Our Upanishadic sages, they discovered our real nature is neither the body nor the mind, but the Atman. Atman is Shuddham Apapa Viddham. It is pure and free from sin. The Atman is ever pure. But this idea of the Atman remained in our scriptures, in our books. Nobody bothered to put it into practice, apply in practical life. It remained in our script books. The greatness of Swami Vivekananda was, Swami Vivekananda was the first person in modern times to raise this question, why we should be moral. And he was the only person who showed that our real nature is the Atman, pure Atman. And so the ontology, according to Vedanta, the ultimate reality, our real nature is the Atman. This Atman is a part of the infinite supreme Brahman. There is a pure consciousness within, and there is also an infinite consciousness outside. Sa ekaha. These two are one. Tattvamasi means only that. So everyone, behind all of us, there is this infinite purity, infinite pure consciousness. This idea, Swami Vivekananda was the first person to propound. Shankaracharya, he could have done that, but he did not do. His solution to the problem was, because he had to deal with the Mimamsakas. So that's a different story. If you go into that there is no time to go into that. His solution was, he divided reality into two layers, the Paramarthika and the Vyavakarika. In the Vyavakarika level, there all these theories of morality, everything is okay, it is all right. But in the Paramarthika level, at the level of Brahman, ethics do not operate. Ethics have no place. The question of ethics, we saw, it is a matter of standard. Morality is Advaita. It does not mean Advaitins are free from moral obligation. The ethics is, Advaita is beyond ethics, but not beyond morality. In Naishkarmya Siddhi of Sureshwar Acharya, it is quoted in Vedanta Sar, Vedanta Sare, at Jagai, Uni Bolchen. If there is no distinction between an illumined soul and if an illumined soul is free above morality, then what is the difference between him and a dog? I shall quote that. Shunam tattva darsham chaiva ko bhedo. If this is the truth, then what is the difference between Shunam and tattva darsham? Those who have realized the truth, chaiva ko bheda. What is the difference between a dog and an illumined soul? If he claims to be free above morality, he is everyone. That's why now and then we hear about the newspapers, some God man, this, he has done this, that, and police have arrested and put in jail. So these people, they claim to be God men and do all this. That is morality. Ethics, that is the philosophy Advaita, has not to be blamed for the actions of these people. But the mistake that committed was we speak about this Mackenzie and so many others, Mackenzie, Hegel, Weber, and several other sociologists and moralists, they have pointed out, India, we have the highest philosophy, but the ethos, when it comes to practical life, we feel serious contradictions. These contradictions happen, and that is these questions is very often raised. That is, the philosophy is not to be blamed. Ethics is beyond. There was a great, in South India, there was a great scholar by name T.M.P. Mahadevan. He was regarded in those days as one of the Dayan of philosophers. He was the head of a particular session in philosophical congress. So he published later on booklet. The philosophical congress itself brought out a booklet, Beyond Ethics, Advaita Beyond Ethics. That booklet I have got with me. So there it is perfectly justified. Advaita as a philosophy, that Shankara did not come for this purpose to establish this unity, social order. He came to establish Advaita as a philosophy. He did it and went away. But Swamiji came with a different purpose. So Swami Vivekananda was the first person to bring out, apply our Vedantic highest ideals. He tried to apply in social life. In one of his talks, which there is no time to quote all that, Swamiji says, people think that highest Vedantic doctrines are above ethics, but I want to show that ethics can be based on highest Vedantic principles. That is what Swamiji told. And that there is no correct word for that. We have to call it ontological ethics. It is a new kind of ethics Swamiji has created. It is different from virtue ethics and action ethics. Action ethics, we saw teleological and deontological theories, and then virtue ethics. But Swamiji gave a third type of that is how the metaphysical doctrines have to be applied in practical life. How ethical views, principles have to be justified on on metaphysical basis. This is known as a new branch of ethics known as meta-ethics. Ethics nowadays is divided into two main divisions. One is the normative ethics and meta-ethics. Swamiji contributed both in the normative ethics, but main contribution was in the meta-ethics. In meta-ethics, Swamiji's main contribution is ontological ethics. He showed how the highest principles, metaphysical doctrines of Atman, Brahman, these can be applied in practical life. That is what he called practical Vedanta. Practical Vedanta means how the highest principles of Vedanta can be applied to solve the worldly problems. It is not Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is different. Karma Yoga is one of the yogas. Its aim is mukti, whereas the practical Vedanta it was originally the idea that the philosophical principles should be applied in practical life. This was first propounded by Karl Marx. That was his greatness. And next to Karl Marx, it was Swami Vivekananda who did this. Unfortunately, these are not very well known. So I was obliged to mention this. That's all. So 3 problems I said. One is ontology, the morality and ethics, the distinction we have shown. And second is why we should be moral. The third problem is morality and spirituality. There is a lot of confusion regarding this. If you study, if you read anywhere, you come across a definition of spirituality. Here itself, there was a seminar on spirituality. The definition of spirituality given in most of the discourses conducted in the West are difficult to understand. Whereas from the Indian Hindu standpoint, there is a clear distinction between morality and spirituality. Why? Because to understand that, we must know the human personality. There are 3 theories of human personality. One is the monistic view, that is the materialistic monism. That holds that man is nothing but the body matter, the brain, the mind is nothing but the brain, activity of the brain, that we shall reject. The other 2 views, one is the dichotomy of body and mind. This was started by Descartes in the 17th century. Descartes. Even before that, Augustine and also Saint Augustine also and Plato also had spoken about this. Body and mind are 2 different things. So spirituality, consciousness belongs to the mind. Naturally, morality, everything belongs to the mind. So spirituality, morality, consciousness, everything applies to the mind. Because man has only 2 entities, body and the mind. Whereas in Hinduism, all the systems of Hindu philosophy, the Shad Darshanas, the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy, apart from that, Shaktism, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, you take all the schools, every school of philosophy in Hinduism says that Atman is different from mind. Also, it's a trichotomy. Human personality is a trichotomy of body, mind, Atman. This Atman idea, Atman is the center of consciousness. Consciousness belongs only to the Atman. The mind and the body both are inert or jada. So this idea of the Atman, our view is body, mind, spirit. Spirit means the Atman. A great Western scholar, what is his name? I just forgot. He was the head of the Department of History of Religions in Chicago University. I forget, just now I forgot his name. He has stated that this idea of the Atman is Hinduism, India's greatest contribution to world thought, world philosophy. Swami Vivekananda knew this. Most of the people did not know this idea, and even in India, Hindus themselves did not know this idea that Atman is different from mind. And this Atman is part of the Supreme Atman or Brahman, that is God. So, man is divine, but in our present state of ignorance, we are not divine. We are only, that's why Swami used the word potentially divine. Each soul is potentially divine. So this idea that man's real nature is neither the body nor mind, but the Atman, and this Atman is part of the Paramatman. This is India's greatest contribution to world thought. So that is why Swamiji said, I have a message to the West, as Buddha had a message to the East. What Buddha's message to the East was, that's a different question. There is no time to discuss. But Swamiji said, I have a message to the West. What is that message? The message of the potential divinity of the soul. So man's real nature is the Atman, the manifestation of this divinity, Atman. That is what Swamiji called religion or spirituality. This is concerning. Spirituality means that which deals with consciousness, pure consciousness, that is the Atman, whereas morality belongs to the mind. So the distinction between morality and spirituality lies in this. Spirituality deals with the Atman, the pure consciousness or potential divinity in us, whereas it is the manifestation of the divinity. Swamiji defined religion. By religion, Swamiji meant spirituality. He defined religion as the manifestation of the divinity already in man. So this way, that distinction between spirituality and morality, this is also another great contribution of Swami Vivekananda. I have taken a lot of time, more time. So anyway, I'm very sorry for taking more time. And then thank you all for listening patiently. And also thanks to Supernanandaji and others for allowing me to do this. Thank you.
I thank you, Revered Maharaj, for presenting your fine and deep thoughts on morality and bringing out the distinctions between various ethical terms in different religions. The Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, when approached, had agreed to inaugurate the seminar, but due to some urgent and unavoidable engagements, she has expressed her deep regret for the inability to attend. The Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture is grateful for the Ministry's continued support and sends its best wishes for the success of the Minister's endeavors in her quest to serve India and her people. We now come to the final lecture to be delivered by an eminent personality, Professor Mrinal Miri, who was a member of the Rajya Sabha from 2012 to 2016. The distinguished professor is a recipient of Padma Bhushan for his contribution in the field of education and literature. Professor Miri graduated from the University of Cambridge in the year 1966, and his books on the subject of humanities, philosophy, education, and ethics have been published by Oxford University Press and their Routledge. He was a chairman of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi. I deem it an honor to welcome the professor and request him to deliver the talk, which he has entitled Ethics, Western and Indian.
Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj, Swami Suparnanandaji, my friend Nirmala Chakravarti, Swami Tadbratanandaji, distinguished members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I must thank Swami Tadbratanandaji for inviting me to this seminar to speak at the inaugural function of the seminar. It gave me an opportunity to move out of the confines of practically my home in Delhi to visit Ramakrishna Mission Institute, Kolkata, city where I spent in my young days a few years of my life. Thank you very much. It was absolutely enthralling listening to Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj. His amazing Catholic scholarship, which included almost all the great traditions of thought, which paid attention to problems of morality, problems of ethics, problems of human life in general, and brought them all together in a way so that we could see that it was possible for them to speak to each other and to learn from each other. This was an amazing experience for me. Very, very rare indeed. My own lecture, as I titled it, Western Ethics, Western and Indian. I think quite a few things have been said about the distinction between ethics and morality. Obviously, they are distinct. I shall also take the idea of ethics to be distinct from the idea of morality. But I don't talk much about this distinction. And secondly, when I wrote this piece at almost one go about a couple of months ago, keeping this seminar in mind. And when I read it again, I found that there are several oddities in what I wrote, and even mistakes. And if I wrote it again, I would in fact put things very differently. And secondly, I'll leave many things out because I don't think I should tax your attention because it's already late, too much. Then my the title, Western, Ethics Western, I don't really deal in great detail with Western ethics. I think my treatment of Western ethics, or Western morality, in fact, is cursory, really. I finish it off, as it were, in a few large kind of assertions, which shouldn't have been done, but I did it. And similarly, there is really no detailed account of ethics, Indian ethics. My main concern was modern Indian thinking, and in modern Indian thinking, I look at Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi. So, moral philosophy in modern West has two main sources: religion and the so-called Enlightenment project, formally inaugurated by Immanuel Kant. For religion or theological ethics, morality is the gift of God to humanity. To be moral is to surrender to God's will and allow His sovereign rules for all humanity, and follow His sovereign rule for all humanity. Enlightenment, on the other hand, the domain of morality, for enlightenment, the domain of morality is strictly within the domain of the logos, reason and speech. As long as morality derived from religion requires overriding speechless faith in God, it is inviolable by reason and knowledge. But the Enlightenment intervention, for the Enlightenment intervention, morality is strictly within the domain of reason, secular. There are two prominent views emanating from the Enlightenment project. One, morality and its universality are dictated by universal, autonomous reason, that is Kant. Emotions and other non-cognitive properties of the mind are not part of the arena of morality. And two, the end of secular morality is happiness for all, the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Since the concept of happiness is quite doggedly unclear, and there may be more views, some mutually incompatible, about the nature of happiness, then it may quite deceptively appear to begin with, the modern Western mind seems to have replaced the idea of happiness with that of liberty, as though liberty were an easier concept to grasp than happiness. The largely accepted modern view is that liberty must be the goal of non-theological morality. Morality consists in applying the right means to achieve this end. The morality of an action is strictly proportionate to its utility in the pursuit of this end. The details and shape of modern moral thinking in the West are a result of combining these two in subtly different ways. We've heard about various different kinds of utilitarianism and so on. And, virtue ethics and the Kantian variety of ethics and so on. However, a particular combination of these two views has often led to somewhat distasteful moral worldviews. Thus, human beings, on one such view, are unique among all beings because they alone are endowed with reason, which enables them to decide between the right and the wrong, between the moral and the immoral. However, not all human beings are endowed or equally endowed with reason, whereby they can validly distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. There cannot therefore be proper, mutually responsive moral interaction between such human beings and the ones who are endowed with reason. There are two attitudes possible for the morally endowed to the ones who are not so endowed. A natural attitude of pity and sympathy for the latter, who, after all, are capable of suffering pain. And two, like the slaves. And two, an urge to lift their level of rationality so that one day they can become full members of the moral human community. The animal exemplifies the being who must be excluded from abstract equality, who has voice but not speech. The animal would include usually those humans who cannot reason and talk. Historically, massive examples of such animal humans would include women, slaves, the colonized, and this. We don't hear of him very much nowadays. There's a philosopher called Salter who wrote this sometime famous book called Religion Without God, Salter's American Indians and Terrorists. This, you will recognize, is the famous white man's burden of European colonialism through the non-white world, throughout the non-white world. It is quite natural for non-white civilizations to react sharply to this extraordinary attempt of the European colonies to degrade the amazingly rich and fecund ethical thinking, moral traditions, and practices of their colonial subjects. The two aims, of course, go together, one effectively setting the other in motion. But think of the Indian tradition, which has embedded in it the Dharma-shastras, the Gita, the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and the Jaina and the Buddhist intervention. The idea that human beings are unique among all earthly creatures in that they, and only they, have the gift of reason and the capacity to distinguish between the moral and the immoral is common between the Western religious tradition, the so-called Abrahamic tradition, and Western modernity. The idea is also at the heart of Western secularism. And the claim is that this secularism, which is pervasive in the Western articulation of law, politics, economics, etc., has come to the non-European world from the West. The non-European world has appropriated it in a break from its own traditions. Even Derrida endorses the view that modernity's articulation of secularism, basically in Abrahamic language, is the gift of Europe to the rest of the world. Thus Derrida, modernity emerges, I quote, modernity emerges, from and is articulated in an Abrahamic language, which is not in the case of Japan and Korea. This is Derrida speaking. For example, that of the dominant religion of their society, the Japanese and the Korean society, but which has become the universal idiom of law, of politics, of the economy, or of diplomacy. At the same time, the agent and symptom of this internationalization. Also, the sacredness of the human, central to the concept of human rights, finds its meaning in the Abrahamic memory of the religions of the book, and in a Jewish and above all Christian interpretation of the neighbor or the fellow man. The idea that secular morality is unique contribution of the West to the non-Western world is unacceptable in the light of glaring contrary evidence. A quick look at examples of the Chinese and Indian traditions is sufficient to throw serious doubts on its validity. Take the dharmic tradition. There are, of course, multiple versions of interpretations of this tradition, but one of the most plausible ways of looking at it is the suggestion that morality is not pre-given prior to human social life. The complex contingencies of human life are the springboard of its emergence. And in the course of the interplay of the moral and the other regulatory principles, the moral acquires an authority that goes beyond its contingent origins. Take the Apastamba Dharma Sutra, or of the Dharma Shastras. It says, I quote, right and wrong, dharma and adharma, do not go about saying, here we are, nor do gods or Gandharvas say, this is right and this is wrong. Let us very briefly look at Manu's exposition of dharma, which may be very different from other expositions of dharma. As the poet Ramanujan says of Manu, I quote, one has only to read Manu after a bit of Kant to be struck by the former's extraordinary lack of universality. He seems to have no clear notion of universal human nature, from which one can deduce ethical decrees. To be moral for Manu is to particularize, to ask who did it, to what, and when, unquote. A denial of universal, unique human nature is a summary rejection of the Abrahamic Enlightenment, universal humanity. And to particularize is to place morality firmly in the domain of this mundane, temporal world. There is, of course, for the greater part of traditional Indian philosophical thought, the world beyond the transient world of humans and other beings, the eternal, never-changing world of the liberated soul, naturally free from the volatilities of the moral life. And this latter is firmly rooted in the contingencies of life in this world. Dharma is the regulation of human life through its ever-sensitive, ever-subtle particularities. It is because dharma is context-sensitive in this way that it can legitimately apply to the most intransigent of human conditions. We have heard of apada dharma, dharma of extremities. Sanatana Dharma, in one way of looking at it, is the set of ethically regulatory principles that have come down to us from ancient times, which have been culled from ancient texts like the Upanishads, Vedas, Puranas, the Gita, and the epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata. And most importantly, reflection on the great variety and subtleties of human experience through time. Sanatana Dharma consists of general principles of action, but they are subject to modifications and changes in the light of the Dharma of the time and situation. Neither monotheistic authoritarian universality nor the reason of enlightenment, but it is these generalities of Sanatana Dharma which guide man in his and her search for the good, fulfilling life in the world. Now, I shall go on to talk about Gandhi. Gandhi uses a deep and supple Indian tradition of ethical thinking. The central moral ideas of this tradition, ahimsa, satyagraha, love, surrender of the sovereignty of the self, being as opposed to just human being, justice between the two and the three, to human beings, and 3 is this system of justice that we have. Fearlessness and the gift of fearlessness. All these ideas are interconnected in multiple ways, and Gandhi's use of them is extraordinarily inventive and original. I shall touch upon only some of the Gandhian ideas which are profoundly opposed to the Western tradition of theological ethics of Abrahamic foundation and its modern secular transformation. Gandhi had a very kind of ambivalent relationship to Christianity. And of course, much later on in his life, he became he developed, there were many Christian friends that he respected, and he developed a tremendous respect for Christianity. But nonetheless, it is interesting how his attitude to Christianity developed through his life. The casting of Christianity as the world religion par excellence, the supreme ethical religion, professing the intention of ethical conquest of the world, that is colonialism, was extraordinarily strange to Gandhi. According to the retrospective account provided in the autobiography and elsewhere in his youth, listening to the missionaries, I quote, stand in a corner near the high school and hold forth, pouring abuse on Hindus and their gods, unquote. He comes to be convinced about the equality of all religions except Christianity, which because of his intolerance could not be equal to Indian religions. Gandhi's attitude to Christianity softened a great deal through the course of his life, but he remained firm in his view that no religion can legitimately claim supremacy over other religions. There is no hierarchy of religions. No religion is superior or inferior to another. Gandhi took into consideration religions which he had intimate knowledge of: Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Jainism, and Buddhism. Among major religions, he did not consider were Taoism of China and Shintoism of Japan. He also did not consider any of the numerous tribal religions. Of his attitude to tribal religions, I have this story. On his visit to what is now Nagaland, prior to India's independence, Gandhi was asked about what he thought of the Angami religion. Angami is one of the Naga tribes. Gandhi's reply was, I would like to join them in their prayers. Gandhi believed that large parts of all religions of the world are temporal and therefore are subject to change and are subject to historical cultural contingencies. They are what may be called grounded faith, held in place of performative continuity. But like all grounded belief, they are subject to change and critical review. Criticism of a religion must, however, be left to the follower of the faith, not because Gandhi believed in their relativistic indifference to another's religion, but because criticism of the other is likely, so Gandhi believed, to be motivated by the desire to undermine it. As we know, Gandhi was right in this. But Gandhi also believed in the religion that resides in all religions. This religion is groundless, ungrounded, and is constituted by what he called daya or prem. Gandhi uses these words interchangeably and translates them as compassion, pity, or love. It is this core of ungrounded faith that resides in all religions, and it is this that makes all religions equal. The Hindu tradition, much older than the Christian, has always allowed the possibility of the ethical life without faith in God. and his miracles, God and his miracles and interventions in this world. Gandhi was a firm believer in this tradition. Think of Gandhi on atheism and his favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Janatu. Vaishnava Janatu is a song in praise of qualities of mind which are ethically and spiritually liberating. A person who has developed these qualities of mind is known as devotee of Vishnu. But the qualities are self-luminous and autonomous. Their self-luminosity and autonomy are not dependent on a prior faith in Vishnu. Their qualities, such as are expressed in empathy for those who are suffering, help without a sense of pride and self-satisfaction for those in need, respect and tolerance for all beings of the world. This is Vaishnava Janatu. Respect and tolerance for all beings of the world, totally without a sense of disdain for any, firmness in speech and deed, freedom from craving, respect for all women, truthfulness in their entire being, total disinterest in the wealth of others, no attachment to worldly possessions and false distractions, Maya, fondness for the name of Rama, the best of humans. Devoid of greed, deceit, lust and anger. The virtues of such a person liberate his entire lineage. This is how the hymn, Vaishnava Janatu, ends. A tradition that can give rise to a song or a hymn such as Vaishnava Janatu has the notion of a secular morality embedded in it and does not have to borrow it from an alien tradition. Satyagraha is frequently equated with Daya Dharma. It is ungrounded because it is beyond the realm of reason and logos. The final response of the Satyagrahi to the question, why Satyagraha, is silence. For Satyagraha requires the relinquishing of the sovereignty of the self. Devoid of the sovereignty of the self, there can be no reason and no knowledge in the enlightenment sense that organizes this decision. It requires faith and silence. Silence is here conceived as a tripartite scheme. Dumbness, that's one. Speech, then silence. This is the tripartite division of which is in terms of which silence is to be understood. Satyagraha belongs not to speech, the zone of reason and logos, nor to dumbness, the subaltern soundlessness, but to silence, a zone that comes only as a withdrawal, which is all to say a traversal both of speech and dumbness. Secular morality belongs to the domain of speech. And as Scaria, a distinguished Gandhi philosopher and a historian, puts it beautifully, the Satyagrahi both affirms this speech and bursts from it into silence. Religion that resides in all religions requires silence, this silence. Faith belongs to the zone of silence. As Wittgenstein said, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Ahimsa must guide action not just towards all human beings, but to all beings of the world, and particularly to all living beings. But ahimsa is never an easy option. Violence and killing done by warriors is preferable to non-violence of those who are afraid to die. This is Gandhi. I quote, I want both Hindus and Muslims to cultivate the cool courage to die without killing. But if one has not that courage, I want him to cultivate the art of killing and being killed, rather than in a cowardly manner flee from danger. For the latter, in spite of his flight, commits mental himsa. He flees because he has not the courage to be killed in the act of killing. Unquote. Also, turning the other cheek, the royal road of turning the other cheek, the Christianity, cannot be a rule to be always followed. To do so would make it a blind fetish. This is Gandhi. There is too the problem of residual killing in everyday life. The inevitable violence, the unavoidable violence of eating and drinking that not even the most rigorous practitioner of non-killing can break from. Unlike the violence implicated in the necessary courage required by the practitioner of ahimsa. This violence is not within the ambit of the principle of ahimsa. It is external to ahimsa, because one never completely renounces the will to live. Aware of this residual killing, Gandhi describes ahimsa by analogy to Euclidean line or point, a high ideal striven for but never achieved. Another concept that is part of the cluster of concepts that constitute the moral, according to Gandhi, is the idea of self-sacrifice. Other ideas intimately related to it are surrendering the autonomy of the self, relinquishing the sovereignty of the self, the pure gift of fearlessness. The third is possible, that is, gift of fearlessness is possible only on the basis of the achievement of the first two. This distinguished French sociologist, Marcel Mauss, you must have heard of him. He worked in the first half, early 20th century. Forms and functions of exchange in archaic society. That is the book, 1925. He famously argued that a gift is a form of exchange between individuals, an individual and a group, or between groups of individuals. The giver makes the gift in actual exchange or in anticipation of an exchange. That is, a return from the recipient. The return may be in kind or a commitment to a mode of relationship such as domination, subordination, honor, and respect. We know we exchange gifts the whole time, and every time we give a gift to somebody, it is not unusual at all for us to expect that there will be a response to this giving in terms either of giving a gift or in kind. But to reduce the gift to a mode of exchange is to turn it into an instrumentality and to render the idea of non-instrumental, pure gift vacuous. This is the criticism of Mauss. The gift of fearlessness is unintelligible except as a pure gift. It can never be given in expectation of a return gift from the recipient. To trade fearlessness with something from the recipient is to denude the idea of fearlessness of any significance. For there would be a huge element of fear left in the giver. What would the return gift be like, and would it come at all? Such a supposed gift of fearlessness would therefore be an instance of self-deception and thus not a genuine gift of fearlessness at all. The gift must be coeval with the relinquishing of the sovereignty of the self. Gandhi also reminds us that it only needs a small extension of the idea to see that self-sacrifice is not limited to humans. The sacrifice of the seed involved in the birth of a plant, the sacrifice of animals to protect their young, and so on. I quote Gandhi, "The child lives only because the mother suffers for it, even to the point of death. The corn grows only when the seed dies." This, of course, is subject to the objection that science is abundantly proven and that behavior of animals, other than humans, and of vegetative life is capable of being fully explained without any residue of explicandum in genetic, physical terms. The so-called self-sacrifice of animals and plants is a purely metaphorical extension of language which belongs properly only to the complex ways in which we meaningfully talk about our mind and the self. There is, of course, also the view that even all human behavior, including behavior that is cultural or culture-specific, is similarly reducible to behavior of physical items. Items recognized by the sciences as the stuff of the world, as the stuff the world is made of. This view, as it stands, is somewhat of an old hat. And although it has interesting subtleties and ramification, it is best to let it rest among the wreckage of discarded views. But of course, in philosophy, there is nothing like a view that is totally discarded. However, there is another very interesting view, that primarily of the philosopher Bernard Williams, respectful of science and its basic instruments and principles of understanding, and yet insisting that there are very specific and large areas of human behavior which require us to move beyond this strictly scientific. These areas of human behavior come under the generic rubric of culture and are encapsulated in concepts such as knowledge, truth, truthfulness, moral, immoral, sincerity, hypocrisy, justice, and so on. Sacrifice and self-sacrifice would, of course, fall quite unquestionably within this arena of human behavior. Williams's word for this variety of explanation is genealogical, a term that he thinks needs a use in a similar purpose. For a similar purpose. The key genealogical inquiry, considering the appearance or emergence or origin of a cultural consequence, begins with the postulation of a fictional state of nature. The state of nature contains a society, a group of human beings who have certain basic needs, including the need to cooperate. E.J. Craig, as a Cambridge philosopher, his illuminating account of the concept of knowledge is an example of genealogical explanation of the kind that Williams accepts. Given the basic need for cooperation, the powers of observation, recognition, etc., that cooperation requires, human beings would develop a concept with just about the properties of the familiar concept of knowledge. It is important to realize that the availability of this genealogical explanation ensures that the concept of knowledge is not reducible to previously existing properties of human beings in the state of nature, including genetic properties, and further that it is therefore non-genetic. Let us suppose that we accept the genealogical mode of explanation as the kind of explanation that truly accounts for the emergence of certain basic human properties and practices, e.g. the ones that we have already mentioned. Would such an account not be available for properties that animals manifest? Perhaps not. The most conclusive argument seems to be the one centering around the issue of language. What is undeniable, perhaps, is that animals have species or subspecies specific. Animals have communication systems. One of the most amazing of such systems is what has been called the language of bees, Carl von Fisch, decoding the language of the bee. The language consists of bee language, consists of various movements of the returning forager bees, movements such as flying in circles in front of the hive, and intricately different motions made by its tail. These movements indicate location of the source of nectar, its distance from the hive, and the quality and quantity of the nectar. The swarm takes its information in and makes its move accordingly. Complex as the bee behavior is, it cannot, so it is presumed, count as language because it can be accounted for without any residue of explicandum in terms of biogenetic, mechanical, causal processes. Any language, if it is a language at all, must be capable of being learned. The most elementary kind of language teaching and learning requires the use of the concept of truth, e.g., this is a dog, this is a table, so on. These are assertions of truth, and the concept of truth is part of a network of concepts such as doubt, certainty, deceit, lie, and so on. These concepts and their ramifications are beyond the capacity of animals to wield. A natural language, moreover, as it has been most universally accepted in philosophy, embodies the form of life, we might even say the culture of the native speakers of the language. A native speaker of a language can, as we well know, learn another language that may be totally strange to him and may become proficient in its use. Anthropologists who study cultures that are completely alien to theirs know that the most authentic understanding of the culture being studied is through a mastery of the language. Language encompasses both the inner and the outer life of a community, and the two in their organically bonded relationship constitute the culture of the community. To master an alien language is at the same time to become privy to the intricate bonding of the inner and the outer, and thus to be able to shed the sense of strangeness of the alien observer. A stranger then becomes a native of another culture. As Jhumpa Lahiri, distinguished storyteller, says after the Italian writer Domenico Starnoni, a new language is almost a new life. Grammar and syntax recast you. You slip into another logic and another sensibility. This is in her book called In Other Words. If the bee behavior is to be counted as a language or part of a language, it should be possible for humans to learn the language and in time to become a native of the bee culture. This obviously is an absurdity, but part of the absurdity may spring from the enormous physical difference between bees and humans. The story, so it may be thought, will be different if we consider, for instance, monkeys or a subspecies of monkeys. But this does not seem any less absurd. Nothing can count as our having learned the language of monkeys, notwithstanding the highly enjoyable Mowgli tales. But this does not, of course, prove that animals do not have an inner life. Lions do not laugh, and dogs do not hum tunes, but lions growl, as you may occasionally do, and dogs whimper. Birds build nests for their newborn and feed them. Elephants protect their young. Tigers stalk their prey. The albatross rears its young by flying every day hundreds of miles to bring food for it. The male bird dances in front of its potential mate to attract his attention. The deer panics at the hint of the presence of the leopard behind the bush. The monkey warns the herd of the presence of danger. Such language is not anthropocentric sentimentality on the part of humans. The gap between possible biogenetic accounts of such behavior and their meaningfulness is too obvious to be deniable. There are cultures which have, as it were, a groundless faith in the inner life of animals, and their being thus objects of our moral attention. Animals suffer pain and therefore need our caring attention. They go to incredible lengths to care for their helpless young, and this deserves our moral cognizance. Since animals do not will language, they cannot be part of our interactive moral community. But paying moral attention to them is perfectly intelligible, legitimate activity for such cultures. They are therefore part of what we might call the ethical domain. There are, on the other hand, cultures for which domain of ethics does not extend beyond human life. The West's resolute reluctance to include animals within the domain of ethics is part of the continuing tradition of Abrahamic monotheistic enlightenment universalism of reason. The inability of the West to see beyond human-centered, or should I say person-centered ethics, is ingrained in the monotheistic frame of thinking that the West is willy-nilly rooted in. It is perfectly understandable that organizations such as the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has originated in the West. Such a movement questions norms internal to a culture. Such norms completely exclude animals from the larger ethical domain. The fact that SPCA has been able to spread its message across the world is a mark of the power that Western civilization still wills to influence norms of cultures other than its own. It is interesting that there can be no white man's burden in the case of animals. Animals are beyond the ethical ken of the colonizer's civilization. And rationality, capacity to reason cannot in any case be raised to any level at all, because animals are totally devoid of reason. Since the capacity to reason is completely absent in animals, the question of raising it to any level doesn't arise. It is not there to be tinkered with in any manner. So the burden of doing so cannot be there either. All that can be done is tinker with our own culture. So the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. But mere tinkering cannot take you far. What you need is a cultural paradigm change, a cultural revolution. But such revolutions would involve a section of human population becoming native to a completely alien world, like the anthropologists becoming irretrievably native to an alien mode of life. Did the Christian revolution eliminate polytheism altogether? Has the feudal world been replaced by a totally egalitarian world? History does not have examples of revolutions such as this. There can certainly be abstract general description of what it would be like to be part of a revolution of this nature, but the crunch lies in details and particularities of life. The preceding world, our world outlook always persists in these details and particularities. What would it be like for a cultural revolution to induce man's ethical domain to expand so as to include animals and plants within it? The SPCA has remained an external weapon in Western culture for the safety and protection of the human world. Its acceptability lies in its utility for the well-being of human life. Gandhi frequently addressed the issue of the responsibility of human beings to care, to serve other animals. In a letter to Nehru in 1925, Gandhi wrote, "Cow protection for me is infinitely more than mere protection of the cow. The cow is merely a type of all that lives. Cow protection means protection of the weak, the helpless, the dumb, and the deaf. Man becomes then not the lord and master of all creation, but he is its servant. The cow is to me is a sermon on pity." The Gandhi, of course, changes as so often his views on animals. You know, there are different shades of his views on animals. I won't go into this. But it is clear that Gandhi regarded animals as having an inner life, what is called the soul, and therefore what he called the soul. I won't call it the soul, and therefore as proper recipient of our moral attention. He was equally emphatic that animals are not part of our interactive human community. Lastly, a word about Gandhi's rejection of what he called modern civilization or modern civility. To desire endlessly is man's natural impulse. Modernity is man. Civility, modern civility, consists in making necessarily incalculable attempts at managing and organizing man's desires in such a way as to devise and invent even new means, ever new means to achieve the satisfaction of infinitely numerous human desires. Politics, economics, structural violence, information machinery of the sovereign state, the knowledge industry and international diplomacy are placed in the service of this primary motivation of modern civility. This pursuit of the infinite in terms of the finite is necessarily impossible. But engagement in this impossible pursuit generates, in Gandhi's words, an incredibly heady intoxication. So Gandhi says, those who are intoxicated by modern civilization, are not likely to write against it. Their care will be to find out facts and arguments in support of it. And it is not even as though they do it consciously. They themselves believe what they write. A man seized by sleep believes in the dream that comes to him. When his sleep flies away, only then he realizes his own mistake. The same is the situation of a man seized by civilization. Their writings hypnotize us, and also, one by one, we are drawn into the vortex. Gandhi's diagnosis of the disease of modern civility may sound quite as heady as the disease itself. But this insight, I think, is invaluable for a critical reflection on our times. We must also remember that Gandhi wrote Hind Swaraj in 1910, and modernity seems to have treaded the path exactly as Gandhi's diagnosis would have led us to believe. I would like to end by making a speculative point about how Gandhi would have answered a reader's questions about how to understand the idea of a totally liberated soul. A totally liberated soul merges into the Paramatman and is necessarily beyond the world of space and time, and therefore beyond the karma bhumi of the Satyagrahi. Paramatman is characterized by three qualities, as we are told: Sat, Chit and Anand. Truth or reality or existence, that is Sat. Consciousness, Chit, and joy. Paramatma is beyond Maya. It cannot therefore be illusory. It is real. It must have consciousness. But its consciousness must be atemporal and beyond the bounds of space. Lastly, it must be Ananda, because it is free from the miseries and sufferings of the world. But can we even say this much about Paramatman? And mustn't we be silent whereof we cannot speak? Is there even an analogy whereby we can perhaps get a glimpse, illegitimate as it might be, of what being merged in the Paramatman could be like? Maybe there is. Let us listen to what one of the most distinguished postmodern fiction writers, Milan Kundera, has to say about ecstasy. I quote, "Ecstasy means being outside oneself, as indicated by the etymology of the Greek word. The act of leaving one's possessions, that is stasis. To be outside oneself does not mean outside the present moment, like a dreamer escaping into the past or to the future. Just the opposite. Ecstasy is absolute identity with the present, instant and total forgetting of the past and the future. If we obliterate the future and the past, the present moment stands in empty space, outside life and its chronology, outside time and independent of it. This is why it can be likened to eternity, which too is the negation of time." That's unquote. We are used to connecting the notion of ecstasy to great mystical moments. But there is such a thing as everyday, ordinary, vulgar ecstasy. The ecstasy of anger, ecstasy of speed at the wheel, the ecstasy of ear-splitting noise, ecstasy in the soccer stadium. Living is a cricket stadium nowadays. Living is a perpetual heavy effort not to lose sight of ourselves, to stay solidly present in ourselves, in our stasis, step outside ourselves for a mere instant, and we verge on death's dominion. This account of ecstasy, if we accept it, at least makes it possible for us to imagine timeless Sat Chit Anand. But of course, the timelessness of ecstasy is within time, the temporal framework, while the timelessness of Sat Chit Anand is totally independent of time. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for the wonderful ethical tenets you put across, especially of Mahatma Gandhi. I'm sure your talk made us all wonder about the amount of personal integrity and deep thought it takes to bring about a long-lasting, humane change in the outside world. Thank you once again for agreeing to participate in this seminar. When I had called you, I clearly remember what you said. Swamiji, how can I say no to the invitation by Ramakrishna Mission, which touched me deeply. I also take this opportunity to thank all the delegate speakers from Kolkata, as also those coming from other places like Jodhpur, New Delhi, Lucknow, Tripura, Bhubaneswar, Hyderabad, and Mumbai. Again, I am especially grateful to the foreign delegates who have agreed in spite of most having to present their papers at odd times, and in spite of some facing acute medical challenges at home. I offer my humble pranams to the revered Vice President Maharaj and thank him profusely for gracing the inaugural session and sharing his enlightened thoughts with us. And we pray for his blessings for the success of this seminar. I am deeply indebted to revered Secretary Maharaj for his encouragement and support and for giving us a free hand to design and plan for the seminar. I also wish to thank revered Swami Atmapriyanji Maharaj, Pro-Chancellor of the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Education and Research Institute, for evincing a keen interest in the seminar and for agreeing to deliver the valedictory address on the last day. I am obligated to the monks of this institute for their unstinted support. My gratitude towards the staff of the institute in general and to the staff of the Indological department in particular for putting their shoulders to the wheel without a second thought. I thank the monastics present here for taking their precious time off to attend this program and also the esteemed audience for their patient hearing. And finally, I am beholden to Professor Nirmalya Narayan Chakrabarti for effortlessly identifying with the cause of this institute and efficiently scripting this seminar while keeping in mind the various constraints in spite of pressing schedules and commitments. I thank you, Professor, from the bottom of my heart. So let us now conclude. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshaha Sarva Yagneshwaro Harihi Tasmin Stushte Jagattushtam Prinite Prinitam Jagate Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.